Dear friends, colleagues, good day for you. Hope it's good and also calm in Ukrainian realities. My name is Gani Maksak. I am Executive Director of Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism, and I'm privileged today to moderate this very important discussion. I see that we are already all here. Maybe some other participants will join us, but I think we will start with no further ado. So today's discussion is called Ukraine's accession to EU challenges and needs. And this discussion is done in the framework of work of Ukrainian think tank Liaison office in Brussels under the project Experts for Ukraine Security, Resistance and European Future. And it's very good that our colleagues from Resource Analysis Center, Society and Environment are ready to launch the discussion. And I think it will be very fruitful for us to discuss what is on our agenda today. So you know all this track we started from the full aggression. It was a fifth integration track for all directions we had previously after implementing association agreements or sectoral cooperation and integration. And now we are on the eve of the opening first clusters, and fingers crossed to have them opened all during this year. But the question which is also very important, that for European Union, it also should be a win-win game. While talking about how European Union is eager and ready to incorporate Ukraine in its club and give its welfare and programs, at the same time, European member states and their society should understand what are on the other side of the field. What should be the benefit from integration of Ukraine? Today, maybe one housekeeping remark. For all participants, please mute yourself, just to have our discussion smooth and swift. So today we have very privileged speakers, friends of European integration, let me put it this way. Liubov Akulenko, Executive Director of Ukrainian Center for European Policy. Iryna Kosse, Leading Research Fellow of Institute of Economic Research and Policy Consulting. Olena Pavlenko, President of DiXi Group. Andriy, Senior Policy Officer, Resource Analysis Center, Society and Environment. Ivan Nagornyak, European Integration Team Lead Easy Business. And Victoria Melnik, European Integration Project Manager, Center for Policy and Legal Reform. So, dear friends, we have some questions which were distributed to you, and let me also voice for our participants. So we would like to see maybe from one hand, where we are at the moment. Are we ready to embark on full-fledged integration, let me say it that way? And are we ready to also embark on accelerated integration as voiced during the recent visit of College of Commissioners and high-level European officials to Ukraine? And what is Ukrainians' role in future of EU and world architecture? Are we a complementary element of the system? What can we bring to the table? Is there a capacity in Ukraine, governmental level, parliament level, and also societal level for accelerated accession to EU? And last but not least, do think tanks and civil society in general play a role in the negotiation process, which is very important for all of us, as we all stand for think tank sector and for advocacy. And I think so. For us, this question is also obvious. It's up to you which questions you want to tackle, but let's us to have our discussion within these questions which we put to our discussion. We have 1.5 hours of debate. I propose to each of you to have up to 7 minutes to first intervention, and then afterwards we'll be having Q&A at the end of all speeches of our distinguished speakers. If there is no questions from your side, let's start. And I would like to give the floor first to Liubov Akulenko. Luba, you have studied for quite a while what is the capacity of Ukraine to integrate, but you also look at impact of the Ukrainian integration to the European Union. Could you just give us your take on
that? Hennady and Natalia, I'm grateful a lot for the possibility to speak today. I would like to focus more on the issues that what we can bring to the EU and not to speak about on what level Ukraine is now. And I would like to show my short presentation if there is such a possibility. If not, okay, I can continue to speak. Is there a possibility to show my presentation, Hina? To share my screen?
You can try to put it on screen from you. Do you see such possibility on your toolbar?
Yes, I'm trying.
Okay, then.
Now you can see.
Yes.
Can you see my screen now? My presentation?
Yes. We see.
Why I want to speak about the issue of benefits from Ukraine, because it's very sensitive thing. For me, if we are speaking about benefits for EU, we should be honest. If EU is ready to accept us or not. Because it is very easy to develop the list of challenges. It's very easy to develop for EU, and also it is very easy to develop the list of profits. But if there is a goal that EU is ready to accept us, it is very easy to transform all these challenges in profits for EU. And it is only the question for EU, if EU is ready to accept us, and if EU is ready to be honest in understanding all the challenges that they can face. The first thing that I want to admit that this enlargement is very specific for EU. I think that it differs a lot from the previous one because EU has a full-scale invasion. Now there is a possibility that America can withdraw from NATO, can leave NATO. And now it looks like that EU was thinking only about economical issues and not about defense. And now they face that they also need to tackle this issue. They face issues of climate change, demographic challenges, and even democratic backsliding. So now there are lots of challenges in front of EU, and we are staying in front of EU and asking to invite us. So this we need to take this into consideration. The first thing that I want to stress is that with us, with Ukraine, EU has a great chance to become a geostrategical player for many reasons. The first thing that America was popular for their approach of soft power. Now they are losing this instrument, but I'm sure that enlargement policy, it's a good soft power, especially for fundamental reforms. And the negotiation process is developed in a such manner now that it is impossible not to become a democratic country if you want to join the EU. So EU can spread this democratic influence. Another thing that EU can also tackle the migration issue. EU can help candidate countries to provide different instruments and to prevent further migration of flows and brains. And the last issue about geostrategic roles, that now with elections in Germany, we saw that there is a great chance for EU to dwindle Russia and China from its territory and to become as the only player in the region. Also, there is another issue, how EU can become a geostrategical player. It is the data of USDA. It's American trade statistic, and this analysis was made by our partners, Ukrainian Club of Agrarian Business. What it is? It is, according to American statistics, they analyze each country and provide them like a place. If it is a first place, it means that you are a world leader. If you look at Ukraine, you will see that we have, when we are alone, we have like one place in sunflower oil, one place in sunflower meal. And when you look at EU separately, EU even do not have the first place. EU have like two. But if you join EU and Ukraine, EU simultaneously is becoming the biggest supplier of food, because now you will see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. EU will receive 5 first places in the world by particular products. So EU is becoming agrarian leader. But the question is EU ready? If EU is ready for this, if EU is ready to tackle common agricultural policy, and if EU is ready to make some changes. And because in case of, there is another risk that it's like status quo, but if to speak in nitty-gritty and to analyze standards, EU standards, there is a risk that adoption of EU standards will not provide the possibility for Ukraine to export a lot of things. So it's another challenge that needs to be discussed. The third issue, and it's like economic data, that each enlargement intensify trade relations between countries. So it's very old data, but anyway, you can see how trade relations between countries are intensifying. And I suppose that potentially in Ukraine it will happen also. Energy, I do not want to stop because we have Olena, Pavlenko. Here we have possibilities like gas deposits, but also we have lots of challenges, critical materials. It's even for me difficult to speak about this issue now because there are lots of researchers where we are describing how many raw materials we have, but now it looks like that America is speculating on this issue. Potentially, maybe EU will be ready to join. And the last infographic that we have, we collected data from all possible calculations that we have from EU think tanks, and we see that, for example, the value of Ukraine's membership. So if you look at this data, the value of enlargement 2004 was like 0.2% of GDP of EU 15. If to calculate the Ukrainian membership, okay, it's only Ukrainian membership, it will be like 0.13. So it's difficult to say that our entrance will be very costly for EU. And I just did not see any calculations together Ukraine, together with Moldova and Western Balkan countries, but taking into consideration that they are so small, potentially I think that the value of this last wave of enlargement will be like on the same level, if we're speaking about money, as it was in 2004. So if
let's leave it here. So perfect timing with your presentation. I think if there would be questions and some maybe comments from your side and from colleagues, we will continue. But now I would like to move to Iryna Kosse. Iryna, we can bring benefits, but about pace and about capacity of Ukraine to bring. Do you think we are ready to do that at the pace which is proposed by our leadership, and which is also might be designated by European Union as accelerated one? So are you ready for that?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to such a meeting. Before I delve into details in specific sectors, how ready we are, let me give some general overview and some my personal remarks. I think that Ukraine has already demonstrated its capacity for transformation. As you can see, even in wartime, reforms have not stopped. The government, parliament, civil society, we are working together to meet the EU accession criteria. And the EU's recent progress report, it acknowledged Ukraine's achievements in judicial reform, in anti-corruption measures, public administration. Also, the digitalization of public services in Ukraine is already ahead of many EU countries, which can set a model for efficiency and transparency. I wanted to highlight that Ukrainian civil society is playing an essential role in pushing for reforms and for ensuring that the country's transformation is not just a government effort, but a societal one. Of course, there are challenges. Of course, we have a challenge with judicial reform, with aligning regulations, with post-war reconstruction, and all this requires coordinated efforts. But what matters is the momentum. Ukraine is moving forward faster than many previous candidate countries at this stage. And with EU support, this process can accelerate even further. And now for some details. The IOR, where I work, prepared a report on 15 sectors, which were selected in a way that this is the sectors where we can move the most, even with the current association agreement. So even the association agreement allows us to join the European market. There is like mixed progress in all these sectors. For some sectors, we've already achieved, like we are part of the European market. For example, in customs, Ukraine joined the joint system of transit, which was done in 2022. In sanitary and phytosanitary measures, Ukraine signed an agreement which recognizes the equivalence of some seeds and grains. This will happen in 2020. This is a partial opening of the market, but still this is a good start. And in transport services, in automobile transportation, as you know, Ukraine signed with the EU what we call the transport visa-free regime, but which was actually liberalization of road transportation. This means that Ukrainian drivers do not need special permits to cross the border. In air transportation, Ukraine signed in 2021 the Common Air Space Agreement. So we joined this market. Of course, right now we cannot use this agreement because the airspace over Ukraine is closed, but in technical terms, we are ready. And also in energy, as Luba said, I will leave that to Olena, but there is really good progress there. But of course, there are challenges remain. You probably have noticed that I only mentioned around like 5 sectors out of 15 that I said we analyzed. So we have the serious challenges in financial services, in telecommunication, in railway transportation, in maritime transportation, in procurement. So there is still a lot to do, but we're having good progress here.
Iryna, thank you so much for the possibility. And I'm also now appealing to our audience. If you have questions to a specific speaker, please use the chat we have in this toolbar to put it to my attention, and I will ask when we are done with all presentations. Now we move to the third panelist, and we have 2 references from previous speakers about energy. Olena, and as far as I know, there was also quite a good announcement during the visit of European officials these days to Kyiv about the integration of Ukraine to energy markets. So how you can assess our chances to be equal partners and what still we need on this track?
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for the opportunity to talk today. Maybe I will start from saying that just recently the Clean Industrial Deal was announced and published. I had a chance to read the unofficial when it was unofficially spread it around, and I have to say that when we read this Clean Industrial Deal text, we saw how many opportunities Ukraine can bring to the EU within this long-term strategy. I'm happy to, I mean, we marked only few of them. First of all, of course, this is renewables. and possibilities to export biogas, biomethane to Ukraine, from Ukraine to the EU. And I'm happy to say that last week or 2 weeks ago, we did this first time. So we already launched all the process. How Ukraine can export biomethane to the EU. Second, this is, of course, which Luba already mentioned, this is a possibility to strengthen EU competitiveness by increasing of gas consumption for some particular sectors, I believe for the industry, for some period of time to stay, again, competitive for the next decades and be able to compete with some other countries who have cheaper gas. And also, this is a possibility to critical raw materials, of course. I'm happy to talk more on this, but let's also propose to talk about possibility to develop electricity manufacturing of different elements for the electricity sector for the EU, because Ukraine will need the same for its grid reconstruction and energy system reconstruction. EU will need this for its own decarbonization path and the implementation of clean industrial deal. Why not to do and to organize all the manufacturing process in Ukraine? We do have the capacity and possibilities. That was my first message, that we can perfectly fit the clean industrial deal and actually Green Deal as well. I would like to share my screen to say my second and third message. My second message would be actually what Ukraine needs for that to help the EU to decarbonize and implement its strategy. 3 levels, I would say. In the short term, if we talk about immediate energy recovery of energy system of Ukraine, I would like to remind again that we are in the middle of the war. We still need a lot of support now for energy system. The Energy Support Fund still doesn't have enough money and costs to provide enough equipment, to buy and provide enough equipment. So this is still very much high in need. Of course, we have a huge need to get sufficient fuel supply. We need to have a better data exchange and use in Ukraine and between Ukraine and the EU. And if we talk about decarbonization, Ukraine should, this is our homework, should start with auctions for renewables with a better design and de-risking scheme. And here, again, the support from the EU will be very much needed. If we talk about the midterm recovery, I would like to add that Ukraine, and we already declared this, will be developing distributed energy generation. We will increase the energy resilience from the flexible generation installment of batteries. We would like to have better access to the EU programs and facilities. I would like to remind that the EU will open a lot to its business, energy business as well, a lot of possibilities of funding in loans, in grants, in blended schemes. And since we also have to align with all the standards, I think it would be fair also to give the possibility for Ukrainian stakeholders to get access to these funds. Then enhancing cyber and physical security. Of course, if we talk about digitalization, smart grids, demand response, real-time pricing, this is where Ukraine and the EU can cooperate really, really well. And if, again, in terms of decarbonization, this is implementation of emission trading scheme and carbon pricing. Again, talking about CBAM, still quite a challenge for Ukraine, and clean industrial deal, if I understand correctly, will look closer how to help different partners, including Ukraine, to better adjust to this targets, let's say. And the long term, I would like to remind that Ukraine does have a national energy and climate plan, which sets very particular targets for energy and climate in Ukraine to achieve. We will have to implement this, and this is decarbonization of heating, and huge task, I would say. This is decarbonization of transport, decarbonization of industry. I would say we also will need a further integration of our electricity system, not integration, rather synchronization, greater synchronization of our electricity system, further diversification of supply. And again, here Ukraine can help with the development of not only gas, but probably a development of its nuclear sector and producing more electricity for its own needs and for the EU. In terms of energy efficiency, we have to mention it here definitely, because energy efficiency first. This is still a priority for Ukraine as well. We have to implement as much as possible the standards from the EU in Ukrainian housing sector in order to rebuild our housing sector better. Just to finish, a few challenges which Ukraine does have: infrastructure destruction in energy. Recently, the World Bank published its rapid damage assessment report. Now we have already $20 billion of losses in the energy sector, doubled from 2023. Skills gap, institutional weakness, market and supply chain disruptions, independence of the regulator is still a challenge. Financial constraints, I talked already about this. Market concentration and investment barriers, and coordination of international support. I will stop here because we agreed on 7 minutes, and grateful for all your questions and comments.
Thank you so much. We have other questions, but let we have them after all speakers have their presentations. Now we move to next our panelist, and I think it's just logical, it goes hand in hand that energy, we have to look into this climate and this environment. So I would like to give the floor to Andriy Andrusevich. And Andriy, my question is, Green Deal. Prior to full-scale aggression, we already tried to design quite ambitious plans for our integrations to Green Deal, to our cooperation. Now we see situation is changed due to war, due to full-scale war, and also due to some changes maybe in policy or discussions about changes in policy of Green Deal within the European Union. So on this track, where we are at the moment, and what is our potential, and basically where we can be beneficial for our partners in European Union.
Thank you. Clearly, I'd like to focus on the benefits from the accession in terms of the environmental and climate change related benefits for the EU member states and for the EU. Clearly, the new era that we are now living in requires us to think from new perspectives of what are the benefits for the EU today, not yesterday. I will share through the chat the small policy brief that we have prepared last year on what could be the and how we assess the environmental climate change benefits for the European Union in light of the European Green Deal strategy. However, today, because of these huge changes in the world trade relations, basically a big change in the US foreign and trade policies. I mean, today we have to reconsider maybe some of the core messages that we have to spread to our partners in the European Union. Well, I yesterday asked some of my colleagues in the EU, some prominent environmental lawyers and policymakers, with just one single question. In one sentence, what are the environmental or climate benefits for the EU from Ukraine's accession? And here's a very brief summary of what I got. Everybody shared, I mean, this is interesting, one message that nature and environment has no borders. So by joining the EU, Ukraine will improve in the overall environmental protection in the European continent. Clean waters, clean air, better air protection policies and legislation and enforcement practices, better protection for the surface waters, rivers, that all will bring benefits to the EU member states directly. Secondly, some of my colleagues believe that the experience Ukraine has in natural disaster management, which we have learned during the wartime, would be very beneficial to some member states who are now, because of the climate change, struggling with some natural disasters. So in general, it is, I mean, there is a general understanding that together the Ukraine and the EU are more greener and more resilient and more sustainable. Now, back to the from where I started, the new era, the new situation that we live now. I do believe that Ukraine's accession at the time when the EU is reconsidering its own architecture, its own policy architecture, its own security architecture, is a good chance for the EU to build a stronger system where the EU can respond to the global challenges it's facing, including US, China, Russia, etc. It is clear that the larger the EU is and the more, let's say, and together with the Ukraine, the EU will be more autonomous. It will have access to more resources, including critical raw materials resources. And in general, it will help the EU to put in place the green transition policies. I mean, some people believe that the European Green Deal is already over in the European Union. This is not the case. This is not the case. The yesterday Green Deal, Clean Industrial Deal announced in the European Union does not step down from its climate neutrality objectives or other green transition policies. Instead, it's just reinforcing the EU capacity to build on that, to implement that. And in fact, it is only the EU. I mean, if anybody in this world, it is only the EU project who can prove to the humanity that the future, that the strong economy can be built on resilience, on sustainability, and on green transition. There's nobody else in the world who can do that. And it is clear that with Ukraine, it will be much, much easier for the European Union to implement this ambitious, as Ursula once said, man on the moon strategy of the European Union. That also comes together with the digital transition. To me, it is clear that Ukraine can provide a lot of experience to the European Union to ensure that the EU's transition is a twin transition, where environmental or green transition and digital transition go hand in hand. And very lastly, on the role of the think tanks and NGOs. I mean, today is the World Day of the NGOs, and we have this statements from the European commissioners on this issue. The NGOs, civil society, they do play a big role now in the accession process, and especially in Ukraine. What I like, for example, by directly participating in some of the negotiation-related activities. What I don't see yet, this is there is a big potential for the cooperation between the EU-based and the Ukrainian civil society, especially at sectoral level. And that's what we are right now. I mean, there are huge opportunities for the EU organizations, for the EU think tanks, for the EU NGOs, that the opportunity that the Ukraine's accession process is opening to them, including for sharing experience, for managing specific even infrastructure projects, or sharing experience in designing specific state policies. So these are the key, let's say, elements where I see that the EU will benefit environmentally and in terms of climate change and climate adaptation from the Ukraine's accession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for finishing your intervention with role of civil society, which is quite crucial for us for our discussion. And it's really a question for us how now at this moment to maybe enhance this cooperation. between European think tanks and Ukrainian think tanks in order to make all these benefits visual for them, transparent. Because what you are saying, I think it is sometimes is disrupted by propaganda done by Russia, but also by, let me be frank, not a big flow of information about Ukraine in some member states. So I think it's an issue we should address jointly within the think tanks community. Thank you so much. Now we move to next panelist, Ivan Nagornyak. And basically, Ivan, you know the situation from two dimensions, being high official in the machine of European integration, and now as a think tank expert. So naturally, my first question goes, your assessment of capacity of government and parliament to deliver within the new scheme which might be proposed, accelerated integration. Are you ready for that in terms of manpower? Are you ready for that in terms of absorption of these capacities of different institutions? And second question, you look also, I know from discussion with you that you look to some global process in European Union and policies. So on this level, where you see that Ukraine could shape policies of EU in right direction? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Hennady. Thanks to organizers for inviting me, and it's a great honor to be with you today. I would like to start my small speech related to answering your questions on the Ukraine's readiness, and that's true that on Monday here in Kyiv, while there was the government college of the commissioners meeting, and Ursula von der Leyen, together with several other fellow colleagues from the European Commission, mentioned that first of all they are ready for kind of like more accelerated accession of Ukraine, that the EU enlargement methodology will be kind of like reviewed for this, but which is even more important is that Ukrainian authorities also said that they are ready to follow this kind of pace. From my perspective, there is some kind of the window for work, let's say that in that way, or improvement, because to be honest, the system for the implementation for the coordination of the European integration in the executive branch of power of Ukraine, it was built exactly for the sake of implementation of the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, and all of the ministries, all of the central executive bodies, they had kind of like departments that were like responsible for this specific kind of work. But to be honest, even with the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, it was in some ways, especially in some very, I would say, hard reforms, it was really hard to push for some of the changes, even with this team of experts who were like in this central executive bodies. Right now, we are in the completely different reality. We are in the middle of the so-called official screening, where Ukrainian authorities are presented to the European Commission the state of play of the implementation of the EU acquis communautaire in the specific negotiation chapter. And I would say that the preparation from Ukrainian side is especially in some of the chapters are really good. Of course, there is of course some improvement needed, but in any case, it is quite well. And even people from the European Commission, my colleagues there, they are saying that Ukraine is doing quite well with that. But the one thing is this general overview, maybe evaluation, and have some planning. Presentations, it's of course important, but when it comes to the realization of the reforms that are under the EU legislation, it's something different. it will require like the efforts from all Ukrainian, I would say, governmental authorities. And here we should go in completely another pace that we have done with the association agreement. And I believe that this year, when we are only opening the first clusters for the accession negotiations, it is the year of opportunity for Ukrainian executive branch of power and and also to the parliament of Ukraine to restructure a little bit, or in some cases not in a little bit way, the way that we are coordinating, how we are implementing the EU legislation. This is the first kind of like point. The second point is that I think that there is a big political will inside of of course, Ukrainian society, but also inside of the Ukrainian political powers to move forward with the EU accession, Ukraine's accession agenda. And here I don't see any kind of like big troubles ahead. Of course, in some day when businesses and business associations and of course some ministries will understand a little bit more deeply the impact assessment of the some of the implementation of some of the EU legislation acts. It will require some more political kind of like push from the leaders of the political parties, but also from the president of Ukraine, from the chief negotiator, to move forward with some of the reforms that are required. But I believe that it's going to happen because there is a will also from the European Commission to provide relevant technical assistance. And we see that, for example, in the Ukraine facility, there is pillar number 3 with special money that the European Commission, the EU delegation here in Ukraine, will pay for the special technical assistance to the Ukrainian government in order to prepare and implement some of the reforms. And I think that here we should be honest with ourselves. We should be honest with the European Commission, what we really can do with our own efforts and where we really need some support from the European side. This is my second point. And my third point is that you mentioned the civil society organizations, that their role. I think that the government made a good step with providing the opportunities for the civil society organizations to participate in these negotiation groups. But also, to be honest, I will say that by now I don't see any like big scale of work there. Like it's only my personal kind of like feeling. I don't see it's boiling. And I think that this is kind of like still unused opportunity for the government to use the knowledge that the Ukrainian academia, the think tanks, has in their own capacities, and they're ready to contribute, especially during the wartime, even pro bono, sometimes to support government with understanding of these reforms, with implementation even with these reforms, writing some even drafts of the legislation acts. And I think that here we could escalate this opportunity. So from my side, I would say that of course we are doing quite well, but this year is a year of opportunity to restructure before we will understand that these capacities are not enough to move forward with the implementation of all of this big chunk of the EU legislation. And the third point is that the civil society is the hand of help rather than someone who is going to criticize the work. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm ready for answers.
For these 3 points which you laid in details. I think it's very comprehensive information. I now address once again to our audience. If you have questions to our speakers, please put them in the chat. We see some of them, and ask now some of our speakers, Maribel and Andriy. There are some questions just to look at them, and we'll discuss. Now we are moving to the last but not least speaker in our panel, Victoria Melnik. And basically it's also logical, Victoria, because you are dealing with fundamentals. It's cluster which is open the first and finalized the last one. So in this way, from what is important for us, have to make our partners confident that we are doing our part of job, because basically many questions arise when it comes to corruption, when it comes to rule of law, when it comes to the judiciary. So what answers do we have for them at this moment? And are these answers clear for them that we are doing our job? And are we ready to deliver if this process is somehow accelerated? Please.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for the question, and hello, everyone. I try to be short because we can speak about fundamentals, I think, for hours. But yeah, we are starting from that and we are ending by that. Sometimes that we are coming for our advocacy visits, we heard many questions about fundamentals, anti-corruption activity, and many others. But we are on our way. We need much more time and effort to implement all of the issues within the fundamental clusters. And this actually activity started not just with the EU accession, but before that for years. Actually, we made great progress after the candidacy status, and this is the transformative power that we felt during this process. But of course, in the fundamentals, we have a different stages, and we need to understand that sometimes it is hard to communicate our achievements, because these achievements can start in 1 year and end in years after that. So, but it is important to be systematic in the reforming process. We need to find answers for ourselves, what we need to do in the reforming process, what we plan to do, and what we can do actually in some deadlines. This is the most important thing today. This year also show us that we need to change a lot of the policy documents, and it should be aligned with the EU integration process and the roadmap that now on the final stage. And of course, for us, it is also important to make a priority for the reforming process, because we cannot do every things in 1 day. We need to understand from what we can start. And now for us, of course, it is important to reform the public administration, because it is the basis for all of the reforming process in the next stages and even within the fundamentals. We need to build a system of the policy formation in line with the EU integration. For us now, it's important things, and this is also correlate with our actually capacity, how we can manage with the EU integration process. Ivan already said about the capacity of the government, but we saw the situation that in some ministry we have absolutely different situation, and this imbalance can destroy all our efforts. We need to be prepared. The cabinet of ministry need to understand what they can do in the next steps of the public administration reform to make the EU integration process stable. Also, as regards to the anti-corruption, the most popular thing, we of course need to communicate not just some problems that we saw in Ukraine, but also our achievements. We have a lot of great things that even Europeans does not have in their countries. For example, declaration and the register for the declaration. So for that. And of course, now we faced a lot of challenges. First of all, the challenges from the full-scale invasion. But now the one more, which not obvious in EU integration process, but US funding freezing actually influence the EU integration process also, because many of the things that financed by US can be a problem in the future, even not so obvious like elections. We saw from the enlargement package that the European Commission understands our challenges with the first post-war elections, but at the same time, we need to be prepared for that. Many of the civil society organizations, not many, but some of the civil society organizations works on the development of the concept, how we can do with the first post-war elections. But at the same time, we have the freezing of the one of the US funding that funded actually cybersecurity of the register of the Central Electoral Commission. And it can be a problem in the future to make this register stable for first post-war elections. And I also want to reflect a little bit on the role of civil society in the fundamental cluster, because our civil society, actually the NGO that work in this area, they have a lot of experience in all of these issues. What is related to the judicial reform, function of the democratic institution, and many others. We already helped the government to prepare for the screening and also to help to develop policy documents. And here, from that, we can understand that this is a national project and we need to support the government, but sometimes maybe to be critical inside of the country to help them understand what they need to change. And of course, inform the society about the achievements, because now we are on the process that much more technical, and we do not have a big news on the changes in this process. And for us, it is really important to help the society and citizens to understand that they benefit from that process, and of course to fight actually some myths about the future within the EU. And of course, what we can give to the EU in the fundamentals, because it's not also an obvious thing that we can speak, as many of the people said that we have a problem with our institution. But full-scale invasions show us that we also can give something for the EU. And this is much more related to the experience of resilience that we have now. It's not a good experience maybe, but in modern realities, we need to think jointly what we can do in the next threat, and maybe what other countries can take from our experience to change their legislation or change their practices in the functioning of fundamental democratic institution. Thank you.
Victoria, thank you so much. Now we're ready to start Q&A, but let me just abuse my role as moderator to start with my round of small, brief question to you, distinguished panelists, but also pay attention to the chat. You have some questions to Victoria Melnik, to Andriy Andrusevich, and to Olena Pavlenko from Andriy Lovkovets. Thank you so much, Andriy, for being so active in providing your questions. I also encourage others to pose your questions to our panelists, but my question would be simple, and it would go in direction of what we discussed about the society, about the agenda for EU and Ukraine jointly. So, colleagues, if you have possibility to advise, you know that only December last year, European Commission started its work. It was already legitimized as an institution. Now they propose a working plan for 5 years, for 1 year. So if you have possibility to advise on one issue which is related to your capacities and experts, to your expertise, what should it be? What you should advise, or what you might advise to European institutions to put on the agenda for discussion or for elaboration during this year, 2025? Point number one. And point number two, you have request from a European think tank, Bruegel, SEPS, EPC, with proposal for one big study which also relates to your expertise. What study you would propose to your European partner? Who is ready to start?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
Andriy, then Ivan.
Yeah, Andriy, and then.
Thank you. I'll start with the chat question. Thank you for the question. The question was in the chat when Ukraine can realistically close the negotiations under Chapter 27, which is environment and climate change. Well, I guess right now the real goal is to open the negotiations on Chapter 27. I am pretty sure that we will be able to close them by the time other chapters are also close to be finalized. Regarding the opening of Chapter 27, I fully share the goal of the government that it must be done this year. Whether we can do it this year, I am also optimistic. And the reason for that is that in the last 10 years, we as a country made a huge progress in implementing some of the core elements of the EU environmental and climate change acquis, including the environmental assessments, EIA and SEA, including the pollutants release and transfer registers recently, the integrated permitting, the climate change law, the framework waste law, the framework water directive. In some areas, there was a huge practical progress made. EIA, SEA, we just at the last, just a few weeks ago, basically, we finally adopted all of the river management plans under the water framework directive, which is a very lengthy process. It has started like 7 years ago. And it's a huge achievement, practical achievement. It's not about transposition. From this perspective, I believe that we are ready to open the negotiations this year. There will be opening benchmarks, we will see. But my focus would be, when do we open the negotiations under Chapter 27? This year? I hope, yes, this year. And regarding, if by asking that question, you mean when Ukraine will be fully ready to comply with the environmental acquis? Maybe 15 years from now. But this is not unusual. If you open let's take one of the most heaviest environmental directives, the urban water treatment directive. It gave, when it was adopted, the member states had 14 years, 11 years for implementing some of its core provisions, like installing the water treatment facilities for some settlements, depending on their size. So it's normal. It's normal that it will take some time. It will take some time, the full practical implementation. Now, regarding the question from Hennady Maksak, I guess the largest, of my interest, the largest potential which needs to be still discovered is how Ukraine, what are those specific elements where Ukraine can be built into the new EU added value chains needed for the green transformation. There is huge potential, renewables, waste treatment, batteries, etc. The question is, how can we be built in? That's a big question, because the EU is trying to become autonomous, less dependent, in particular on some supply lines. And those supply lines include not only core raw materials or critical raw materials, but they also include technologies. And we do have some, surprisingly, technologies. So I believe a study and the potential for accelerated, let's say, discussions with the EU institutions would be what are those specific elements where Ukraine can be integrated or built into the new added value chains related to the green transformation in the EU. Thank you.
Andriy, thank you so much. Very interesting direction. I think even we should discuss how to put it on the agenda with our European partners. Next was Ivan, and then after Iryna.
Thank you, Hennady. I would like here briefly to say some words about the EU kind of like policy-making process. According to my information and what was publicly also announced by President of the European Council, European Commission, sorry. In March, April, there will be a lot of political kind of proposals for the long-term reviews of the policies published by the European Commission. It will be like dedicated for 100 days of the new Commission of the Ursula von der Leyen. And I think that probably here it's very important for Ukraine, especially here, maybe the government is too overloaded with the current works that is under the accession process. Here, Ukrainian think tanks has to be more proactive, analyze the proposals, and maybe to have a voice from Ukraine on these proposals. Definitely, what was also proposed, there will be a white paper on the European defense policy prepared by the new Commissioner for Defense and Space, Mr. Kubilius. And here I think that Ukrainian think tanks has to be also active on responding, on analyzing, on proposing some ideas that were not included or something like that. This is the things that I think would be very important for us as Ukrainians also to discuss with European think tanks. In medium perspective, I know that there is an appetite for the reviewing of the enlargement methodology, and I believe that during this year it will be also like published some at least communication from the Commission. I believe that here Ukrainian think tanks and Ukrainian academia could be also more proactive, providing some ideas how to make this process more efficient. I really like the presentation of Liubov Akulenko because she is very active in changing a little bit this methodology. But I believe that it's also about the changing some procedures in the EU itself. Just yesterday, we had a meeting with some members of the European Parliament who are still here in Kyiv, and all of them they are saying that there, in the nutshell, there is a problem inside of the EU why they are a little bit cautious about the enlargement. So that's why we, as the Ukrainian think tanks, we have to be also active and look deeply into those proposals that are on the table, both how the EU looks forward into the changes in themselves, but also about the reviewing of the enlargement methodologies. And so I think that this is the main issue that we have to look throughout this year. And as Andriy said, this environmental perspectives and how we should analyze and also contribute to the future of the European Green Deal is also very important, because I believe that this discussion that is right now over this critical raw materials issues and so on is underestimating the environmental impact of this agreements. And I think that this is something that we as a society, and also following the EU acquis communautaire in the chapter 27, we will have a lot of work to do over this agreements. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer another questions.
Thank you so much. Now, Iryna, afterwards, Victoria. Victoria, you also can look at the question which is posed to you in chat, just to have them jointly. Iryna, please.
Thank you. I wanted to briefly answer, Gennady, your questions about the focus of the new commission. This year, two important economic agreements are expiring. One is about autonomous trade measures, and another is about the road transportation liberalization. Ukraine would definitely would like to have either a permanent agreement in their place or to prolong the existing ones. And I think these two topics are very important for the new commission also. And relating to the research, which could be beneficial for Ukraine from the European think tanks is, we can measure the effect of EU accession on Ukrainian economy, but we would like help from the European think tank side on the effect of Ukraine's accession on EU economy. And this will give our negotiators some arguments during the talks. So this my brief answer.
Thank you so much. I think some efforts out there. There was a big report by Bruegel, which tried to assess in some way what you mentioned. But I think clearly that the more studies we have on this issue, the better is to communicate what are pro and cons on different areas.
Yeah, but I would like to see like more reports on specific programs, specific measures. For example, the solidarity lanes, like separately. Whether it had any impact not just on Ukraine, but on the EU countries, on neighboring countries, stuff like that.
Okay, just related to the issues you mentioned about autonomous preferences and about transit and transportation. On these issues you mentioned, so that's what is the value for European partners, right?
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Victoria, please.
Thank you, Nadia. I start from your question, what EU need to do this year. Of course, EU need to help us to open this fundamental cluster, first of all, and avoid this stopping but some of the countries. Because for us, it is really important, this dynamic in the reforming process. And of course, when we have a motivated civil services and motivated politicians, we need to save this and push the EU to open fundamental cluster. That is really important for us, especially in these circumstances that we have now. What regarding to some questions from our audience, as regards to the European Court of Human Rights judgments regarding to the function of the NABU, of course they need to change the practice, because this is not just the needs for us to avoid some other and further changes in human rights, but this is our obligation within the Council of Europe to implement the judgments and change the legislation or practice. So for us, it is really important also for EU integration, because within the chapters which is related to the chapter 23, actually, what is related to the fundamental cluster, they also assessed the number of our judgments within the implementation and under the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. And if we speak about the possible opening of the fundamental cluster and the future possible rule of law report, we need to understand that if we want to show them good progress, and maybe even better in some member states, we need to show the good progress also in implementation of the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights. And in this area, we also have a lot of systematic problems that we have for 20 years. For example, from the signing of the treaties. And also, I saw the question from Vasil that what is related to the democratic issues and the avoiding of the backsliding.
If I may just to leave this question for the next round, because it's for all speakers, just to have on the same line all the answers. Thank you so much. So now we move to Olena. Olena, you have two questions in chat, and my question: what should be priority of EU and maybe on think tanks in 2025?
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start from your question. The priority for the think tanks in terms of the 2025 agenda. Again, I think because we are in the war, because the capacity of the government is still, we have to be honest, is still not at the highest level. We need to help government, and we need to help Ukrainian stakeholders, government, to organize a really good, impactful negotiations with the EU side. Simultaneously, unfortunately, Ukrainian think tanks should play a role not only slide dog, but also watchdog, and should stay independent and be able to monitor and track how to better how the implementation of the EU directives and regulations in different sectors are going on in Ukraine. So I think the roles which we usually have, a combination of several roles, we should just keep them in 2025, and again make sure that we are doing everything we can do as Ukrainians to ensure that 2030 and Ukraine's accession in 2030 is a realistic scenario. There was a question regarding nuclear sector. Maybe I will comment on this as well. According to the energy strategy of Ukraine till 2050, nuclear sector will remain one of the sectors for electricity generation. It will be a big part of our balance. It is now a huge part of our balance because now I think more than 60, if not 70% of electricity generation is nuclear because of all the destruction of energy sector. So we still will rely on the nuclear facilities, on the nuclear generation. I think in the midterm and according to the energy strategy in the long term as well. I would like to note as well, or to state as well here that we do not think that the plan to build nuclear power plants on the old reactors, and especially Russian-related reactors, it's a good idea. We, like many others, are not supporting this. Although, again, we do see potential, and I'm speaking on behalf of Just Energy think tank, because we have all different views here. But I think that Ukraine does have a good knowledge potential to look at the new technologies in nuclear sector and develop them here in Ukraine to support not only Ukraine, but also European countries. We can work with France, we can work with the US, we can work with other countries who are looking at the nuclear to make it safe, to make it clean, and to make it decentralized as much as possible, and to make it sustainable.
Olena, and question from Igor Brezhatый on.
Could you please? I didn't find this.
Suitable for steel production process in Ukraine have been affected by the war. As a result, green steel for Ukraine is becoming an absolute priority if we want to preserve the industry. Questions. First one, can Ukraine receive grants similar to those that Germany and Slovakia recently provided to their industries via Ukraine facility? Second, do the EU would be reluctant to open up for such grants, considering that the industry is mostly under the control of Ukrainian oligarchs?
Yeah, it's a good question, as always, from Igor. I agree that our steel industry is also very much impacted by the war. On the one hand, you are right. The coal the coal generation is or the coal mines are destructed or occupied. On the other hand, the steel making industry also was hit by the destructions as well, and many of the steel producers could not start work. We are still are in process of recovery. And in addition to that, We are a subject of all the decisions from the EU side regarding the steel exports in the future. But we have this discussion in Ukraine how to ensure to transition to green steel in Ukraine. I cannot comment regarding the funding facilities for this particular industry as of now. It's just not my scope. I'm more about the energy part. But I want to say that we are very much advocating now the possibility for the businesses from different sectors in Ukraine to apply for, to allow Ukrainian businesses also to apply for different European trust funds. For example, RRF, I think Resilience and Recovery Fund, which has more than 250 billion, I think, from this COVID time. And it is open for European business for decarbonization. So our suggestion and our position is that why not to give it also the possibility for Ukrainian business to use this. There are also other trust funds within the EU which can be open for our businesses. And again, because we are starting from much lower level than the European businesses are, and we need to move much faster. Sometimes probably it's good because you can leapfrog, but it also might mean using more resources, getting more money, getting more support. And here we should very much rely on the European support as well.
Well, thank you so much. I would like to have like a final round of our answers, and Vasil Babich's question on possible risk of slowing down the accession process of Ukraine is something very good to wrap up our discussion. So I will read it out, and then I ask all speakers maybe to reflect on this question and maybe to give some final remarks from your side. So question is posed like this: on risk of slowing down of Ukraine's EU accession process in 2025 and democracy decline. As experience of Georgia and Turkey clearly shows, you could freeze accession negotiations with a candidate country if it has a visible decline in field of democracy and rule of law. This is negative conditionality. According to recent declared intents from the EU top officials, the EU expects opening 3 negotiation clusters with Ukraine this year. Given complicated situation due to peace talks, possible elections in Ukraine, risk of political and societal polarization, what is the Ukrainian government and civil society should do to prevent the risk of democracy, rule of law decline and secure opening 3 clusters this year, and possibly in first part of 2025, and not to have the accession decline in 2025? So what government and society should do not to have this decline? Victoria, you wanted to dwell on this question, please. Shoot first.
Thank you. I can start from that. First of all, I actually cannot think about such bad scenarios like in Georgia. I do not see the possibility of that in Ukraine now. But actually, what is related to the democracy development, I think that the first that we need to do to build a good basis for that. So develop all of these policy documents that we need this year jointly, government and civil society, and promote their adoption this year, because we need to understand that, first of all, we do not need to speak about election this year because we do not have a time to prepare for that. We need at least 6 months for preparation for the first post-war elections. And actually, OSCE said that they need 9 months to prepare for Ukrainian post-war elections, to prepare their monitoring mission to Ukraine. And this is also important because it's not just about the going to do a voting, but it's also about the democratic elections. And for us, we made also the statement from more than 100 organizations that we need to be prepared, and we cannot do this election immediately after the peace talks or changing in the situation with martial law. But from that side, we need to understand that maybe then next year or next 2 years, we need to think about some changing in their decision-making process, if it can be a political cycle or elections. And for that, it is a good idea to be prepared to develop all the policy documents and develop all the instruments and methodology recommendation, how we can manage with all of our obligation within EU accession process. And for that, also important the activity of civil society, like a watchdog, to monitor all of the democratic development, decision-making, and legislative process.
Thank you. Dear friends, could be the next.
Can I?
Yes.
I think Ukraine has a strong history of resisting serious declines in democratic institutions. So I am not very much, let's say, afraid that the Ukrainian people and civil society will tolerate any, let's say, decline. We will see it coming, and certainly there will be some actions from the civil society to prevent further decline. However, I do believe that at the time of during the wartime, the civil society and think tanks have a very strong sense, or have adopted a very strong sense of self-censorship. And this is, I think, understandable. However, I do believe that when the peace is reached, at some point there will be peace, right? All wars have an end at some point. I think the civil society will have to return back to its usual role of being an independent watchdog and an advisor, a third party, and to keep a very close eye on the democratic developments in the country. That's what I think, that we need to prepare that at some, this will be the turning point where we cannot just focus on helping the government because we think we help the country in this way. That overall we will need to have a kind of step back and say, okay, wait, this time is over. We need to, somebody has to watch, to be independent, and to give signals if there are any declines in democracy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Who wants to be the next to wrap up and answer this question?
I'm happy to pick up
Yeah,
if I may.
please.
So I will be short. I want to say that we are in the situation where we have too many threats around, and we have to prioritize somehow what we should deal first, second, third. It doesn't mean that some of the threats are less important or more important. We just need to, to prioritize them. And I think to win the war, I would like still to say to win the war, not just to stop, is a priority first. Second, we definitely, as a civil society, should still keep monitoring the situation in Ukraine. So everything what is happening, not in accordance to the rule, not in accordance to the law, should be documented. And that should be us who should keep this role and take this role. And when a time comes, then we should have our voice, and we should actually do what Andriy and colleagues said. We cannot allow the scenarios which we see in Georgia and in other countries. That also is our role as well. Again, we all remember Orange Revolution. We all remember Revolution of Dignity. It was done by Ukrainians, so we all have this role. We will play this role in the future as well. But again, now we really have to win the war first.
Well, thank you. Iryna, Ivan?
I really have
Yes.
nothing to add because everything was said. We will definitely keep our role as a watchdog. We will have to make sure, and the government has to make sure that they have a capacity, despite any possible changes after the elections, to continue the negotiation talks. So they have to preserve that expertise and that knowledge gathered during the negotiation, so that the pace would be kept the same or even accelerated. And yeah, the civil society right now is in a difficult situation when we want to help the government, and we're partially becoming part of the government, but at the same time we have to remain outside of the government to be able to perform our duty as a watchdog. And I think that for the years to come, we'll continue to have this issue. So the civil society also has to improve its capacity in that way as well.
Thank you. Ivan, do you want to comment on some issues and wrap up? If not, I have to declare, dear friends, that we are perfectly on time with our discussion. And here I would like to mention that I'm delighted that we have the discussion, because in the end of the day, we see that what Ivan mentioned, to see that is boiling in civil society and expert community, is something that we could do during 2025, because the window of opportunities is open and our role is crucial in many possible ways, as all you mentioned, in different directions, with different functions. But we have to do that, to keep it on agenda, not only in Ukraine, but also in European Union. I would like once again to thank organizers for having this event, and also our distinguished panelists for having this discussion. Your contributions were invaluable, and I think that many of the points you made resonated with our audience. Special thanks to Andriy Levkovets for many questions and comments. I think it was also part of our discussion. Thank you so much. Keep it safe and keep working on what you do, because I think it's very important for our integration and for our resilience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues.